last panelist, last but not least, I must say, is Mr. Eduardo Chimela, who is, as I said, the National Director of the Employment Observatory in Mozambique. When we were preparing this session, I joked that Mozambique is the only country that during this period was able to mobilize 15 billion US dollars for investment into the oil and gas industry. And we were joking, how much is that money going to create jobs, especially for the youth? So over to you, Mr. Chimela, to tell us more, since you are at the National Employment Observatory.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't take much of your time. I just want to thank you, first of all, for inviting us to speak on this important issue, jobs for Africa. 15 billion US dollars is a pile in the sky, I would say so. It is not easy to get it, it's not easy to see it. It will end somewhere, but what we really want is to have jobs in Mozambique. Well, the global debate brought about by the COVID-19 is unprecedented, and it has no one to blame. For the first time, it is something that has no one to blame, unlike wars moved by self-serving attitudes propelled by people. So this pandemic calls for a meeting of the minds across the spectrum, across the rank and file. Even children are made to act on it to save their own lives. These are not children in armed conflict, they are children in global health crisis. They have also to wear masks, remain indoors, wash hands time and again. In short, behave like grown-ups do. So Mozambique is a country that by world standards is one of those with tremendous potential to place itself on the world map and become a real emerging economy. But sadly, it has been caught off guard, firstly by terrorism in one of its most strategic oil and gas-rich province, Cabo Delgado, that so far has displaced 240,000 people and killed 1,000 so far since its outbreak in 2017. But this war is not coming from inside, it's coming from outside. We don't know who's moving it. But we are happy that for 10 years running until 2017, the economy was growing at an average of 10% per annum, and the driving force had been our commodities, chiefly aluminum, coal, and gas, whose exploration started early in 2000. But the country is also vastly agricultural based and constitutionally so. The growth recorded in those years was coupled with an upskilling of 15 million economically active population through a TVET reform program that started in 2006, which gave birth to a TVET law enacted by Parliament in 2014. So we witnessed the growth of the higher education, whereby the country counts with 53 higher learning institutions offering a range of courses for our young population. At the employment level, the growth of the economy in different sectors gave the youth a range of job opportunities in the value chain, and also the country became a host for experts that were brought by foreign companies, which was also vital for the economy and also skills transfer. And the impact of the COVID-19, well, early in 2020, economic growth forecast was pointing to the right direction. So we are looking at above 3% growth, above 3% growth. even though the global commodity markets were reeling due to the outbreak of COVID-19 in China and its side effects in other countries. It was, after all, a disease in China, but it went across continents. The spread of the COVID-19 across continents and in the sub-Saharan Africa in particular caused a scare that made governments resort to stringent measures to prevent and contain the spread. The government of Mozambique declared a state of emergency starting 1st April. It was not a fool's day, it was real. 6 months down the line, a survey conducted by our National Statistical Office brought to the fore the devastating effect of the COVID-19 on the economy, as we are going to share the statistics. Of the 89,385 companies surveyed, 90.4% were affected by the COVID-19. The 4 provinces in the south of the country are the worst hit. We are talking about 95%. Of these, the resort province of Inhambane, which is in the south, was the most affected at 98.8%. The education and entertainment and sports sectors were affected 100%. In terms of the size of companies, we look at 0.5% share of the total of companies surveyed. The big companies share 0.5% of the 89,000 companies surveyed. They were the most hit, affected with 91.1%. But the most affected sector was the small business sector, which has 70,000 companies. So you look at 89,385, 78.3% of those companies were small companies, small and medium companies. And the impact of the government state of emergency, which gave companies 3 options like contract suspension, termination, and closing down their businesses. With a view to minimize the impact on employees, 56% businesses opted for rotation of their staff. And of these, 41.7% adopted a weekly rotation, followed by less hours of work at 20.7%. And then telework placed at 14.3%. Of the total businesses affected by the COVID-19, 3% decided to close their business down, which resulted in the unemployment of 43,578 workers, 55.5% of which were in retail and vehicle repair businesses. In the first months of COVID-19, we're talking about April, May, and June, only 87.3%, 80.9%, and 80.2% of businesses paid salary staff in full. In terms of gross business profit, compared to the first quarter, there was a reduction of 41%. And the businesses least affected by COVID were the real estate, which stands at 48%, water, electricity, and refuse removal at 52%, agriculture, livestock production, fishing and game with 76%. And also amongst them, state-owned companies were less affected at 80%. But we had the sole traders who were the most affected at 91.4%. We are talking about a workforce of 3 million workers, of people who were surveyed. Of those, 38.5% were placed on rotation and 12.1% had reduced hours of work. And also, 7.6% of the businesses resorted to suspension of contracts, affecting 1.9% of the workforce, or say 62,700 workers. And 4.5% of businesses terminated the contracts of their workers. Most businesses adopted the weekly rotation, clocking 41.7%, followed by the daily rotation at 32.7%, while the 15 days recommended by the Health Ministry was applied only by 19.7% of businesses. So the Ministry of Health was recommending a 15-day rotation, but that clocked 19.7%. So it was less adopted. However, the termination of contracts adopted by 4.5% businesses affected more workers, or say 77,489 workers, or 2.3% of the 3 million workers surveyed. Closure of businesses that involved 2.3% of the total caused 1.3% of unemployment. In other words, 43,579 workers were affected by the closure of businesses. By geographic location of businesses, many cases of business closure were recorded in Zambezia province, which is in the central region of the country, with 13.6% of businesses, and caused unemployment to 27,000 people. Regarding the suspension of contracts, Cabo Delgado, which is up north, is leading with 20.2%, and Manica in the south, in the Central Highlands, which borders Zimbabwe, had 12.9%, while in Nyambane, Maputo City in the south, and Sofala in the central region are leading in the number of workers affected with 13.7%, 27.7%, and 12% of the total workforce of 62,000 with their contracts suspended. The termination of contracts affected Cabo Delgado businesses at 8.1%, Maputo at 6.8%, Gaza at 6%, while Maputo City, Sofala, and Tete have more workers with their contracts suspended at 67.1%. The hospitality industry adopted the suspension of contracts with its 19.7% against 17% of terminations, affecting 15,997 and 15,690 workers, respectively. So those two provinces. And business in administrative and support services, the equivalent of 16.8% of those that terminated contracts caused more unemployment with 28,000. So we're looking at administrative services and support services. They were the most hit with 28,000 workers unemployed. And the small business sector was more affected. We're looking at 3.1 businesses that closed down their businesses, which gave rise to 41,000 workers being unemployed. And also were the most affected suspensions and termination with 48,000 and 71,000 workers, respectively. And looking at the impact of worked hours and days, business volume and employment outlook, there is a reduction of number of workers and also per capita hours and days of work, representing 5.9% reduction of the 3.3 million workers surveyed in the first quarter of this year. So, gentlemen, the impact of COVID was more on women at 7% against the 5.5% of men, which with incidence on April, the first month of the state of emergency. So we have more women affected by the COVID. Regarding the days of work, the reduction was 17.6%, having moved from 26 days in the first quarter to 18 days per worker in the second quarter due to rotation. And same with hours of work that dropped from 5.5%, moving from an average of 7.9 hours per worker per day in the first quarter to 7.5 hours per worker in the second quarter. And geographically, the reduction of hours of work were more pronounced in Gaza province in the south of the country with 12.8% and Maputo city with 11.2%. So the drop in unemployment is also a reflection of the reduced volume of businesses compared to the second quarter of 2019, having recorded a drop of 53.5% against 24.8% of the first quarter, especially in April, which was at 60.7%. In terms of expectations in employment, we have Niassa, Tete, and Maputo City who have more businesses with positive outlook, where business confidence index stands at 87%, 86%, and 81% respectively. While in Nampula and Inyambane provinces, the former in the north and the latter in the south, forecast reduction in employment at 55.3% and 49.7% of businesses. In short, the suspension of contracts and the closure of businesses together caused unemployment in the amount of 121,068 workers. And based on the Social Security data for the second quarter of 2020, there were 452,100 workers and 51,622 employers registered, which implies that most of the affected small businesses, of which we are talking about, the 70,000 reported by the survey, were not on the Social Security system. And the sole traders were the most affected and were not on the Social Security. And the telework has become a reality and will cause more unemployment. So, gentlemen, it is very unfortunate, but this is our reality. We will have to face this reality and work hard together to see we overcome this change, as no one country alone will single-handedly solve the problems. We have to join hands. We have our partners. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chimela, and for that call for partnership, for working together so that we can face the crisis.